She hit the rocks 30 feet below the cliff edge, and the sound her body made against the stone was something the two wolves standing above her would hear in their sleep for years. Her left arm bent wrong, her vision whited out, and the cold river at the base of the ravine grabbed her broken frame and pulled her downstream before she could even scream. What happened in the next 72 hours would become Blackmore Valley legend, a story whispered about for decades. How a human girl left for dead at the bottom of Ghost Ravine didn't just survive, but walked back into the most powerful wolf territory on the continent and changed the bloodline of the Alpha King forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Her name was Maren. 23 years old, no wolf blood, no pack affiliation, and absolutely no business being inside Blackmore territory. She'd crossed the border 6 hours earlier on foot, starving, carrying a bag with a water bottle and a folded photograph of her younger brother. That's all you need to know about her past for now. The rest comes out in the blood. The river spit her out a quarter-mile south, wedged between two boulders in a shallow bend. She coughed up water and something red. Her left arm was useless. 3 ribs on the same side felt like shattered glass every time she breathed. She rolled onto her good side and used her right hand to drag herself up the bank, fingernails tearing against wet stone. Believe me, most people would have stayed down. The fall alone should have killed her. The river should have finished what the fall started. But Maren had been running for 11 days before she ever crossed into Blackmore, and the thing chasing her was worse than rocks and rapids. She got herself onto flat ground and lay there, chest heaving, staring at a sky full of stars she didn't recognize. The forest around her was black and dense. No roads, no lights, nothing but the sound of the river, and something large moving through the underbrush 50 yards east. Her whole body locked up. She couldn't shift. She couldn't fight. She was a human in wolf country with a broken arm, and whatever was in those trees was getting closer. She heard the snap of a branch, then another, then the soft pad of heavy paws on wet leaves. Not one set. 3. Maren pushed herself upright against a tree, good arm wrapped around the trunk. Her breath came in short, ragged pulls. She didn't close her eyes. She wasn't the type. 3 wolves emerged from the tree line. Big ones. The smallest was the size of a motorcycle. They fanned out in a half circle around her, low to the ground, ears forward. The one in the middle, dark grey, almost black, with a scar running from its left eye to its jaw, stopped 10 feet away and just stared at her. "I'm not a threat," Maren said. Her voice came out cracked and thin. "I can't even stand up straight." The scarred wolf tilted its head. Then it shifted. A woman stood where the wolf had been. Tall, hard-faced, maybe 40, with the same scar running through her left eyebrow. She wore the shift like putting on a coat. Casual, practiced, no hesitation. "You're human," the woman said. "Not a question." "Yeah. You crossed the northern border." "I didn't know it was a border. I was just running." The woman looked at Maren's arm, then at the bruises already blooming across her exposed skin. "Running from the people who threw me off that cliff. Get this." The woman didn't flinch, didn't ask a follow-up question. She just turned to the 2 wolves still flanking her and made a short, sharp sound in the back of her throat. Both wolves sat, just like that. "My name is Sarah," the woman said. "I'm the Beta's second. You're on Blackmore land, and by our law, any human found inside the borders gets taken to the Alpha King for judgment." "And what does the Alpha King usually judge?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "He judges fast. Here's what nobody tells you about Blackmore. It wasn't just a territory. It was the territory. The largest wolf pack on the continent, 1,500 strong, ruled by an Alpha King named Kyle Draven, who'd held power for 12 years without a single successful challenge. He was 34, unmated, and ran his pack with the kind of cold precision that made neighboring alphas lose sleep. His word was absolute, his border was sacred, and humans were not welcome, not as guests, not as prisoners, not as anything. Sarah bound Maren's broken arm with strips torn from her own jacket, which surprised Maren enough to shut her up. Then Sarah shifted back, and the 2 flanking wolves closed in, and Maren understood she was walking, or stumbling, to meet a king. They moved through the forest for over an hour. Maren fell twice. Both times, one of the wolves pressed its shoulder against her good side until she found her feet again. She didn't understand why they were helping her. By every account she'd ever heard, wolves didn't help humans. Wolves tolerated humans at best. At worst, they made examples of them. They broke through the tree line and Maren stopped. The Blackmoor compound spread across the valley below her. It wasn't a village. It wasn't a camp. It was a fortress built into the mountainside. Stone walls, iron gates, watchtowers every 100 yards, lit by torches that burned white instead of orange. Hundreds of wolves moved through the courtyard, some shifted, some in human form. The whole place hummed with organized power. No lie. Maren almost turned around. Almost took her chances with the ravine. Sarah nudged her forward with a low growl, and they descended. Inside the gates, every wolf they passed stopped and stared. Not at Sarah, at Maren. She could feel their eyes cataloguing her, the broken arm, the torn clothes, the human scent that must have been screaming through the compound. A few wolves bared their teeth. One spat on the ground as she walked past. Maren kept her chin up. She didn't speed up, didn't slow down, didn't look away from a single one of them. It was the only power she had, and she used it. They reached the main hall. Stone floors, high ceilings, a fire pit in the center large enough to roast a car. At the far end, on a raised platform, a man sat in a chair made of dark wood and iron. Kyle Drovan. I swear this happened. Maren's first thought when she saw the Alpha King was that he looked tired. Not weak, not soft. Tired in the way that granite gets tired after centuries of weather. He had dark hair cut short, a beard that needed trimming, and eyes so pale they looked almost silver in the firelight. He was built broad and dense, the kind of frame that didn't need to prove anything. He wore a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, forearms corded with muscle and old scars. He watched Maren approach the way you'd watch a stray dog that wandered into a restricted area. Curious, but not concerned. Human, he said. His voice was deep and flat. You crossed my border. I was thrown off a cliff inside your border, Maren said. I didn't cross anything voluntarily. A murmur went through the wolves gathered in the hall. Sarah stepped forward. Alpha, I found her at the base of Ghost Ravine. 2 sets of wolf tracks at the top of the cliff. Her injuries are consistent with a fall from that height. Kyle's eyes moved to Maren's bound arm, then to her face. Who threw you? 2 wolves. I don't know their names. They caught me 4 miles north of the ravine. What were you doing 4 miles north of the ravine? Looking for my brother. He was taken by a pack called the Ashfall 6 months ago. I was told they operated near your northern border. The room went quiet. You know that feeling when you say something and realize you've accidentally stepped on a landmine? Every wolf in that hall turned toward Kyle. Sarah's face went pale. Even the fire seemed to pull back. Kyle stood up from his chair. Slowly. The kind of slow that makes your survival instincts start firing. He descended the 2 steps from the platform and walked toward Maren until he was close enough that she could see the silver rings in his irises. Ashfall, he said, is not a pack. Ashfall is a trafficking operation. They move humans and low-rank wolves across territories for labor, for breeding, for sport, and they have been a thorn in my border for 3 years. He paused. You walked into wolf territory alone as a human to find someone taken by them. Yes, that's either very brave or very stupid. Maren held his gaze. Probably both. Something shifted in Kyle's expression. Not warmth. He didn't seem built for warmth. But something behind his eyes moved. Some calculation changed. He opened his mouth to speak. And that's when the door at the back of the hall burst open. Now here's where the story turns. Trust me on this. A woman rushed in, middle-aged, panicked, out of breath. Alpha, it's the pup. She's gone again. We've searched the east wing, the nursery, the courtyard. She won't come when called. She won't respond to anyone. Kyle's jaw flexed. How long? 40 minutes. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, the exhaustion Maren had noticed earlier made sudden, complete sense. Find her, he said to Sarah. Take 6. Check the kitchens, the stables, the southern wall. She likes the southern wall. Sarah was already moving, but Maren, and this is the part that changes everything, Maren heard something the wolves didn't. A small sound, almost nothing, coming from directly beneath the raised platform. A whimper, not pain, fear. The high, thin sound of something tiny and terrified hiding in a dark space. Maren dropped to her knees. Her broken arm screamed, but she ignored it. She lowered her head to the gap between the platform and the stone floor and looked underneath. 2 gold eyes stared back at her. A wolf pup. Tiny. Couldn't have been more than a few months old. White fur trembling all over, pressed flat against the cold stone as far back as she could get. She looked at Maren and made that sound again. That small, broken sound. Hey, Maren whispered. I see you. Every wolf in the hall froze. Kyle turned around. She's here, Maren said, not looking up. Under the platform. She's scared. Kyle took a step forward, but the pup saw him coming and scrambled deeper. Claws scraping stone, the whimpering getting louder. He stopped, his hands curled into fists at his sides. Here's the thing about alpha wolf pups. They're supposed to be fearless. They're supposed to bond with their parent, their pack, their family from birth. They're supposed to recognize dominance and find safety in it. This pup was terrified of her own father, terrified of every wolf in the room. She'd been hiding, running, refusing contact for weeks. No one could get close to her without sending her into a panic. Now watch what happens. Maren lay flat on her stomach, broken arm tucked against her body, and extended her good hand under the platform. Not reaching, not grabbing, just resting it on the stone, palm up, fingers relaxed. You don't have to come out, she said softly. You can stay right there. I'm not moving. The pup's gold eyes locked onto Maren's hand. The trembling slowed. One small ear rotated forward. Kyle stood behind Maren, watching, not breathing. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Maren didn't move, didn't speak again. Just waited with her hand out, palm up, bleeding from the knuckles where she'd torn them climbing out of the river. The pup crept forward 1 inch, then another. Then she stopped, nose working, sampling the air around Maren's hand. Maren's scent wasn't wolf, wasn't pack, wasn't anything the pup had ever encountered before. And maybe that was the point. The pup pressed her nose against Maren's fingertips. Then she licked the blood off Maren's knuckles. Then she crawled out from under the platform, climbed into the crook of Maren's good arm, and buried her face against Maren's chest. You could have heard a pin drop in that hall. Maren sat up slowly, cradling the tiny white pup against her body. The pup's eyes were closed. Her trembling had stopped completely. She was asleep within 30 seconds, one small paw curled around Maren's thumb. Kyle Draven, Alpha King of Blackmoor, the most powerful wolf on the continent, looked at this broken human woman holding his daughter and couldn't say a single word. Sarah came back through the door with 6 wolves in tow, ready for a search. She saw the pup in Maren's arms and stopped dead. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible, Sarah said. And yet, Maren said quietly, looking down at the sleeping pup, here we are. This is the part of the story where everything that came before starts to matter. So keep up. The pup's name was Lyra. She was 4 months old, born under a blood moon, which in wolf culture meant she was destined for power or destruction. Her mother had died in childbirth. Since that night, Lyra had refused to bond with anyone. Not Kyle, not the nursemaids, not the pack healers, not the elders who tried rituals and herbs and forced proximity. She ran, she hid, she screamed when anyone with wolf blood came close. 4 months. This had been going on for 4 months. The Alpha King had conquered territories, crushed challengers, built a fortress that could withstand a siege, and he could not get his own daughter to let him hold her, until a broken human woman lay down on a stone floor and opened her hand. Kyle made a decision in that moment. You could see it happen. The way his posture changed, the way his shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, the way his pale eyes went from calculating to something raw. He walked to Maren and crouched in front of her, close enough now that she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "What's your name?" he asked. First time he'd asked. "Maren. Maren. My daughter hasn't let anyone touch her since the day she was born. She's been starving herself because she won't nurse from any wolf we bring in. Our healers say she'll die within the week if she doesn't bond." He paused. His voice dropped. "You're staying. That's not a request." "No." Maren looked down at Lyra, who had burrowed deeper against her chest, tiny claws gripping the fabric of Maren's shirt. "I have conditions." A wolf behind Kyle let out a low growl. Kyle silenced it with a look. "Name them." "My brother. You help me find him. You use your resources, your scouts, your intelligence network. I stay and care for your daughter, and you bring my brother home." Kyle studied her for a long beat. "Done. One more thing." Maren's voice was steady, but her hand was shaking. "The two wolves who threw me off that cliff. They were yours. They wore Blackmore markings on their left shoulders." The temperature in the room dropped. Not figuratively. Maren could see her own breath. Kyle's eyes went from silver to something darker. He turned to Sarah. "The Northern Patrol. Who was running the border tonight?" Sarah's face had gone to stone. "Garrison and Mott. Bring them to me. I want you to understand what just happened. The two wolves who threw a human woman off a cliff were Blackmore wolves. Kyle's own people. They'd caught a human on their border, and instead of bringing her in for judgment, which was the law, they decided to execute her themselves, which meant they'd either disobeyed a direct order or someone above them had given a different one. You following? Good. Because it gets worse. They brought Garrison and Mott into the hall 20 minutes later. Two big males, young, arrogant, walking in like they owned the ground they stood on. They saw Maren sitting alive and holding the Alpha's pup, and both of them stumbled. Garrison recovered first. Tall, sandy-haired, built lean. "Alpha, we found this human crossing the northern border. Standard protocol. We were defending the territory." Kyle didn't stand up from where he'd positioned himself beside Maren. "Standard protocol is detainment and judgment, not execution. She ran. We pursued. The cliff was, she fell." Maren cut in, voice hard. "He grabbed me by the throat and threw me. His partner held my arms while he did it. That wasn't a fall. That was an attempt to kill me." Garrison took a step toward her. "You're lying. You're a human. You don't get to speak here." Lyra woke up. The pup's eyes snapped open, gold and furious, and she let out a sound that no 4-month-old should have been able to make. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a whimper, it was a growl, deep, resonant from somewhere primal and old, vibrating through the stone floor. Every wolf in the room felt it in their bones. Sarah took a step back. The two flanking guards dropped their eyes. Lyra was staring directly at Garrison, and her tiny body was rigid with aggression. She bared teeth that hadn't fully come in yet, her white fur standing on end, and she pressed herself harder against Maren's chest, protecting, claiming, "Right here. Pay attention. This is the moment." Kyle saw it. Every wolf in that hall saw it. An alpha pup, his alpha pup, had chosen. The bond that hadn't formed in 4 months of trying snapped into place in the space between one heartbeat and the next, and it didn't connect Lyra to her father, or to her pack, or to any wolf. It connected her to Maren, a human. The Alpha King's heir had bonded with a human woman who'd been broken and discarded at the bottom of a ravine, and in doing so, Lyra had made Maren untouchable. Pack law was clear. Anyone bonded to the Alpha line was Pack. Full protection, full rights, full standing. Maren was no longer an intruder. She was family. Garrison understood it at the same time everyone else did, and his face went white, because what he'd done at that cliff wasn't just an unsanctioned kill anymore. It was an attack on Pack family, on the Alpha's daughters bonded. The penalty was death. He bolted. made it 4 steps before Sarah intercepted him with a tackle that cracked 2 of his ribs and put him face first into the stone floor. Mott didn't even try to run. He dropped to his knees and bared his throat. Kyle stood up. He walked to where Sarah had Garrison pinned and looked down at the male who had tried to murder the woman his daughter chose. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. Who told you to kill humans on sight? Garrison spit blood. No one. I acted on my own judgment. Kyle put his boot on Garrison's hand and pressed until the bones creaked. I'm going to ask one more time, and you're going to understand that your answer determines whether you die quickly or slowly. Garrison screamed. Then he talked. It was the Beta. Kyle's own second-in-command, a wolf named Thorn, had been running a side operation for the past year, intercepting humans who wandered close to the border, eliminating them, and selling the cover story as standard patrol action. Why? Because Thorn had been cutting deals with Ashfall, letting their runners cross through Blackmoor territory for a fee. Humans who got too close risked seeing the operation, so Thorn had standing orders with his patrol teams, no witnesses, no survivors. Here's what you need to know about betrayal at the top. It doesn't just break trust, it breaks the entire structure. Every order Thorn had given for the past year was now suspect. Every patrol route, every border assignment, every report on Ashfall activity, all of it was compromised. The wolf Kyle had trusted to guard his territory had been selling it piece by piece, and Maren's brother, taken by Ashfall 6 months ago, might have been moved right through Blackmoor land, escorted by Blackmoor wolves, under Blackmoor protection that Thorn had sold. Kyle's face didn't change when he heard this. That was the scariest part. No rage, no disbelief, no shock, just a stillness that made the air around him feel heavy. He looked at Sarah. Where is Thorn now? The East Tower. He retired an hour ago. Wake him up. What happened next took less than 15 minutes, and it rearranged the power structure of the largest pack on the continent. Sarah brought Thorn into the hall. He was a big man, bigger than Kyle, with a shaved head and hands that could crush a cinder block. He walked in with the casual arrogance of someone who didn't know his world had already ended. He saw Garrison on the floor, saw Mott on his knees, saw Maren holding Lyra, and his eyes did the math. He shifted instantly. His wolf form was massive, jet black, 300 pounds, built for killing. He lunged at Maren, not at Kyle, not at Sarah, not at the guards, at Maren, because if the bond was broken, if the human died, the evidence died with her, and Lyra would be unbonded again, and the chaos might give him enough cover to run. He never reached her. Kyle shifted mid-stride, intercepting Thorn in the air. The collision was like 2 trucks hitting head-on. They crashed through the fire pit, scattering burning wood across the stone floor. Kyle's wolf was smaller than Thorn's, but faster, and he got his jaws around Thorn's throat before they hit the ground. But Thorn was a Beta for a reason. He twisted free, raked claws across Kyle's shoulder, and drove him into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. They separated, circling, blood on both of them, the hall erupting into shouts and movement. Maren pressed herself into the corner. Lyra clutched against her chest, shielding the pup with her entire body. Her broken arm was on fire. She could barely see through the pain, but she didn't run. She watched the fight with clear eyes and steady breath because she understood something the wolves didn't. This fight wasn't about territory or pride. It was about whether the most powerful pack in the region would continue to be run by a man who'd sold humans to slavers. It was about her brother. It was about Lyra. It was about whether the word of an alpha meant anything at all. Thorn lunged again, going for Kyle's legs, trying to take him down. Kyle sidestepped, pivoted and clamped his jaws on the back of Thorn's neck. Thorn thrashed, bucked, twisted. Kyle held. His claws dug into the stone floor. His muscles trembled with the effort. Blood ran from the wounds on his shoulder in dark rivers. He held. 10 seconds. 20. Thorn's thrashing weakened, his legs buckled. His body went flat against the stone and a high, thin sound escaped his throat. Submission. Forced and total. Kyle shifted back to human form. one hand still on Thorn's neck, kneeling over the massive black wolf. His shoulder was torn open. His hands were covered in blood, his and Thorn's. He looked up at the assembled pack, every wolf in the hall watching, waiting, holding their breath. Thorn conspired with Ashfall to traffic humans across our territory, Kyle said. He ordered the execution of civilians to protect his operation. He betrayed this pack, this land, and every oath he ever swore. He tightened his grip. The sentence is exile beyond the borders. His name is struck from the rolls. Any wolf who shelters him shares his fate. He released Thorn's neck and stood up. The black wolf lay motionless for a long moment, then dragged itself upright and limped toward the door. No one helped him. No one spoke. He passed through the gates and disappeared into the dark forest, and that was the last time anyone in Blackmoor saw Thorn alive. This is what I mean about decisive moments. 1 second, the Beta was the second most powerful wolf in the territory. The next, he was nothing. No pack, no name, no protection. And the woman who started it all, the human who should have died at the bottom of Ghost Ravine, was sitting in the Alpha King's hall with his daughter asleep against her heart. Kyle crossed the room to Marin. He was bleeding badly. He lowered himself to one knee in front of her, and for just a moment, the mask dropped. She saw the father underneath the Alpha, the man who hadn't slept in 4 months because his daughter screamed every time he came near. The man who would burn his own house down before he let another person hurt the woman his child had chosen. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Your shoulder is hanging open and you're asking me if I'm all right." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a grin. Close enough. "My shoulder will heal by morning." "You're holding my daughter. That makes you more important." Marin looked at Lyra, then back at Kyle. "She's beautiful. She looks like her mother." He said it without flinching, but his hand found the edge of the blanket someone had draped over Marin's shoulders, and he tucked it tighter around her and the pup. A small gesture, precise, careful, the hands of a man who wanted to hold his daughter and was afraid to break the first peace she'd ever known. "Let me tell you what happened over the next 3 weeks, and I'll keep it tight because the ending is coming and you need to be ready for it." Marin stayed. She slept in a room adjoining the nursery. Lyra pressed against her at all times. The pup ate for the first time in days, special formula the healers prepared, fed by Marin's hand. She gained weight. Her eyes got brighter. She started making small, happy sounds instead of terrified ones. And slowly, real slow, the kind of slow that takes patience most people don't have, Marin started bridging the gap between Lyra and Kyle. She'd sit with the pup in the hall while Kyle worked at his desk nearby. Not close, not threatening, just present. Lyra would watch him from the safety of Marin's lap, gold eyes tracking his movements. Day by day, the distance shrank, an inch, a foot, a chair length. On day 12, Lyra crawled off Marin's lap and toddled 3 steps toward Kyle's chair. She stopped, looked back at Marin, then turned and took 2 more steps. She pressed her nose against Kyle's boot and sneezed. Kyle didn't move, didn't breathe. His hand gripped the arm of his chair so hard the wood cracked. Lyra climbed onto his foot and lay down. I've seen tough men break. I've seen soldiers cry and fighters fold. But I've never heard anyone describe the sound Kyle Draven made in that moment. Something between a laugh and a sob, pressed through clenched teeth, without their own voice catching. He reached down with hands that could tear a wolf apart and picked up his daughter for the first time. And she didn't scream. She didn't run. She yawned and grabbed his beard and pulled. Marin watched from across the room. She didn't say anything. She pressed her good hand against her mouth and let the moment belong to them. Now, the brother. True to his word, Kyle deployed scouts the day after Thorn's exile. 12 teams, covering every known Ashfall route through the Northern Territories. Sarah led the primary unit. They tracked shipment patterns, interrogated captured runners, mapped safe houses. 3 weeks of relentless searching. On day 21, Sarah's team found the camp. 40 miles north of the border, hidden in an abandoned mining complex. 16 humans held in underground cells. Marin's brother, Callum, 17 years old, 30 pounds lighter than when he was taken, but alive, was in the third cell. Sarah brought him home on a Tuesday morning. Maren was in the courtyard when the convoy arrived. She saw the wolves first, then the rescued humans walking between them, and she scanned every face until she found the one that matched the photograph she'd carried across 3 territories. Callum saw her at the same moment. He stopped walking, his face crumpled. He said her name once, and then they were running toward each other, and Maren hit him with her good arm and pulled him in so tight that he coughed. "I told you," she said into his hair. "I told you I was coming." "You're insane," he said. "You're actually insane." "Yeah. Runs in the family." If this story has hit you in the chest even once, do me a favor and subscribe. Hit that button. I don't say this lightly. Stories like Maren's deserve an audience. Be part of it. Now let me finish this right. The Ashfall operation collapsed within the month. Without Thorne's protection, their Blackmore routes dried up. Kyle coordinated with 3 neighboring alphas to dismantle the remaining network. 43 humans were recovered. 11 wolves who'd been forced into trafficking labor were freed and offered asylum. Ashfall's leaders scattered, hunted, and eventually caught. Maren's arm healed crooked. The pack healer offered to re-break and set it properly. Maren said no. She said it was a reminder. When Kyle asked her what it reminded her of, she looked at him and said 7 words. "The fall I survived to get here." That was her line. She never explained it. She never expanded on it. And nobody in that hall ever forgot it. Lyra grew. Fast, the way alpha pups do. Within 2 months, she was shifting between human and wolf form, toddling around the compound with the confidence of someone who owned the place, which technically she would someday. She bonded properly with Kyle, with Sarah, with the pack, the way she was always supposed to. But her first bond, her anchor, the one that cracked the wall open, was always Maren. Callum stayed in Blackmore. Turned out he had a knack for logistics, and Sarah put him to work coordinating border patrols, the real ones, the honest ones, the ones that actually protected people. He was good at it. He was alive. That was enough. Kyle offered Maren a formal position in the pack, advisor, guardian to the air, a title, a home, a place. She accepted on one condition: no more humans die on your border. Not one. Anyone who crosses gets brought in alive, judged fairly, given a chance. Kyle looked at her for a long time. This was the woman who'd been thrown off a cliff by his own wolves, pulled from a river half dead, dragged into his hall as a trespasser, and told she had no right to speak. She was standing in front of him now, making demands of the Alpha King, and his daughter was asleep on her shoulder. "Done," he said. And between them, in that space where words run out and something else begins, an understanding settled. Not a romance. Not yet. Something quieter. Something built on broken bones and cold rivers and a tiny white pup who chose a stranger's heartbeat over the howl of 1,000 wolves. Whatever it was real, and it was growing. Blackmore changed after that. Not overnight, not in a revolution, but in the slow, steady way that a river changes the shape of a canyon. Humans were granted passage rights through the territory. A clinic opened near the southern border for travelers. 3 other packs adopted similar protocols within the year, and in the Great Hall, carved into the stone above the fireplace, someone etched a line that visitors would ask about for generations. She fell. She rose. The pup chose true. Nobody ever confirmed who carved it. Sarah denied it. Callum claimed ignorance. Kyle said nothing, though more than one wolf noticed he touched the letters every time he walked past. The way you'd touch something precious that you want to make sure is still there. Maren never touched the carving. She didn't need to. She carried the proof of it every day. In the crooked set of her left arm, in the girl who ran to her every morning, in the brother who sat at her table every night, in the pale-eyed king who learned, slowly and imperfectly, and with tremendous difficulty, that the strongest thing he ever did was let a human woman lie down on his floor and open her hand. That's the legend of Ghost Ravine. That's the story of the woman who was thrown off a cliff as nothing and came back as everything. And if you take one thing from it, take this. Sometimes the most powerful creature in the room isn't the one with the sharpest teeth. It's the one who stays open when everything in the world is telling them to close.